Movember, day 14, and for today's video I'm going to read a chapter out of this book, Mending a Shattered Heart. Now this book's a guide for partners of sex addicts and to help them overcome the impact of betrayal from the addiction. But in particular, this subject tonight is, what should I tell the kids? So if you're a couple and there's been infidelity, when you've got kids of different ages, it's a big question, and especially when the kids are teenagers. What do we tell them? When do we tell them? So I'm going to let Stefanie Carnes do the talking here. This is from that book, Mending a Shattered Heart. It's one of the critical texts in this field. And I'm going to read off my Kindle just in front of this computer. So by all means, with every resource I share, please, if something here speaks to you, please go to the resource itself. This is Dr Stefanie Carnes, Mending a Shattered Heart. The book there is in the video. You can go back and screenshot. And I can't recommend her work more highly. So, Chapter 9, What Should I Tell the Kids? Stefanie Carnes, PhD. Sydney was mortified when she learned that her husband's sexual improprieties at work. She had long suspected Gary might be having an affair with his secretary, but she always believed his explanations. Their relationship was platonic, and his long work hours would result in a promotion from dean to provost at the state university. Cindy was shocked when Gary told her he was being investigated for sexual misconduct and harassment, and the allegations had been made by 5 different women. Moreover, he would probably lose his job. Nothing, however, prepared her for what she learned next. The investigation would be publicised by the news media because of Gary's position at the university. Cindy and Gary had always been respected members of the community and took pride in that. She imagined the way people would gossip about them at church and at the country club. She was wrestling with all of these concerns when it dawned on her that they would have to share this information with their twin daughters, Emma and Rachel, aged 11. Emma was a sensitive girl who was very close to her father. Rachel, while was closer to Sydney, was having a difficult time at school. Sydney was overwhelmed thinking about sharing this information with her daughters. She couldn't imagine the impact her husband's conduct was going to have on them. Should the children be told, or should we try to protect them? For many parents, determining how much information to reveal to children presents a huge dilemma. In the best circumstances, the decision is made after careful discussion and planning with a therapist who has specialized training in treating sexual addiction and possible additional experience in child development and child counseling. Determining whether to disclose and deciding how much to reveal can be an agonizing decision. Parents must consider many variables, including the age and developmental maturity of the child, content information to be shared, the child's current level of stability, and the dynamics in the family. And while it's common for therapists to make recommendations, it's equally important for parents to remember that, as expert of their children's personalities, they are ultimately best suited to decide how much information to share with them. Disclosure to children is a touchy issue, and even the most seasoned therapist may struggle when making recommendations to families following different types of disclosure scenarios. So let me just turn this page. Forced disclosure. This occurs because the child will soon learn the information through a non-nurturing disclosure process. Delayed disclosure. This occurs when the parents jointly choose to wait to share information until the child is old enough to process the information. Softened disclosure. This usually involves developmentally appropriately sharing that doesn't include detailed information about the sexual behavior. Sometimes a softened disclosure is followed by a delayed disclosure when the child is older. He or she receives more information then. Unbalanced disclosure. This disclosure comes from the partner instead of the addict, and often it doesn't include the addict. It can be done in anger or with poor boundaries, and it usually results in the child becoming caught in a triangle, choosing sides, then reacting on behalf of the person who is perceived to be the victim parent. Discovery. This happens when the child discovers the sexual acting out on his or her own. For example, the child learns of an affair or finds the pornography stash. In some cases, the child may learn this information before the partner does, and in others, the parents may believe the child doesn't know when, in fact, she or he does. Some paths of disclosure are healthier than others. It's essential when planning a disclosure process that the best interests of the child always remain the focus. Good reasons for disclosing to children include the following. We want to teach direct, open and honest communication in our family. We don't want to perpetrate family secrets. We want our children to know us and understand our path to recovery and health. We want to share this part of ourselves with them. We want to stop the transmission of addiction from generation to generation in our family by educating our children. As with most situations that involve children, the child's needs supersede the parent's needs. During trying times, it can be difficult for parents to have strong boundaries and protect their children, but this is usually what is in the children's best interest. I think my child knows something is going on. What should I do? My best friend saw my dad in a park with a man. My parents are now separated and I have to pretend that I have no idea what the problem was. I feel so uncomfortable around him now. I put on a happy face when I see my dad, but privately I am grossed out. And that's Jeremy, 11. If your gut is telling you that your child knows what is going on, you are probably correct. In a survey conducted by Black, Dillon and S. Carnes, researchers found that 67% of cases, children already knew about the sexual acting out prior to disclosure. If the parents continue to deny or hide the problem, it sends some powerful messages to the children, such as, "This is such a shameful secret, I could never talk about it." Why do not openly discuss difficult issues? We do not openly discuss difficult issues in the family. And sexual acting out is okay as long as it is kept in the family as a secret. If you find yourself in this predicament, it's often helpful to uncover more information about what the child does or doesn't know. It may be useful at this point to involve the child in therapy. The child's therapist can be instrumental in finding out what the child already knows and can then work with the parent's therapist in facilitating a family session that involves the disclosure and open communication about the addiction. If the parents only suspect the child knows information about the sexual acting out, they may find themselves in a difficult quandary. On one hand, they don't want to perpetrate a shame and dishonesty through secrecy and cover-ups. On the other hand, they don't want to disclose information to the child that he or she may not be ready for. Parents in this situation should work with a qualified therapist in determining the best choice for them given their circumstances. What is an appropriate age to disclose this type of information? It's important to keep in mind that no matter the child's age, some open and honest communication may be appropriate. The key to remember is that sharing should be developmentally appropriate. Alice's story. When Alice was just in her teens, she discovered online pornography. She soon found herself addicted to the readily available images. She was attracted to the websites that included some romantic and sexualized chat. Her participation would often lead to hookups with men for casual sexual encounters. She also dated, looking for Mr. Right. When she met Dan, a corporate attorney, she instantly fell in love with his romantic and witty personality. But even after she married Dan, she continued to secretly surf for pornography online. After the couple had 2 children, Alice attempted to quit looking at porn and tried to put the lifestyle behind her. As a stay-at-home mum, Alice's life was full until her children began attending school. Then she suddenly found herself with a lot of unstructured time during the day. She soon returned to those old websites that once offered her so much excitement. Alice began feeling increasingly isolated from Dan and was stressed about her continued unemployment. Her time online escalated, and it wasn't long before she was hooking up with men she met online for casual sex. As Alice spent more time online, she began to neglect her role as a mother and a wife. She continued to grow distant from her family and began feeling close to her online buddies. Dan became suspicious when he came across some suggestive pictures on their home computer. When confronted, Alice was initially defensive. There were fights and arguments. Ben, 7, and Tiffany, 5, were puzzled by their parents' sudden moods. Why was Daddy so angry? Why was Mummy so tense? Dan continued to pressure Alice for answers. She reluctantly admitted she was doing online, and Alice decided to seek treatment for a sexual addiction. Once there, Alice told Dan about her sexual encounters. Once the couple engaged in the recovery process, they made a renewed commitment to the marriage. They were both concerned about Ben and Tiffany, and they knew the children had felt the tension between them. They wanted to openly address this tension with the children and be able to speak about their recovery and renewed commitment. With the help of the therapist, they planned a family session with the children. Alice told the children she had lied to Daddy and caused tension in the relationship. Dan and Alice assured the children that the conflict had nothing to do with them. They also emphasized that they were committed to the marriage and the family and were working with honesty and recovery with one another. Ben and Tiffany were relieved and could see that parents were starting to get back to normal. As you can see in the above example, the disclosure was softened because the children were so young. According to child development expert Jean Paget, who developed stages of cognitive development for children, and I'm sure that's not how you say that name, but anyway, is it Piaget? Who developed stages of cognitive development for children. Children have a limited capacity to understand abstract thinking around concepts such as addiction prior to age 12. Additionally, most children have a limited understanding of sexuality prior to mid-adolescence. So the concept of sexual addiction is confusing to most children, not to mention that children are typically uncomfortable discussing sexuality, especially when it refers to their parents. Parents of older children may consider a full disclosure which include that the parent is in recovery from sexual addiction and general information about acting out. For example, Dad is in recovery from pornography addiction or prostitution use. Ideally, children should be a minimum age of mid-adolescence before considering a full disclosure. It's also imperative to consider many other variables when making this decision. The maturity of a child, stress level of a child, family relationships, and other factors specific to one's family. Talking over all the extenuating variables with a good therapist can be helpful. Of course, if the child is likely to learn the information through a non-nurturing disclosure process or already knows, then full disclosure at a younger age should be considered. Examples of language used in disclosures. Softened disclosure and acknowledgement of reality. Daddy hurt Mummy, so he's going to sleep in another room for a while. Mummy and Daddy have been fighting because Daddy lied to Mummy. This is between Mummy and Daddy. We love you, and it is nothing to do with you. Full disclosure if the situation warrants. I am a sex addict. I have been dishonest and broke my marriage vows by hiring prostitutes. This has affected my relationship with you in the following ways. I'm in recovery, and this is how I am planning to take care of myself. I am a sex addict. My cyber sex has gotten out of control and has impacted my ability to work and stay involved with you and the family. I have received treatment and have a plan around this. I would like to be open with you if you have any questions about this. So there's some examples for that. My child is struggling in many areas of his life. I'm worried that learning about his father's sex addiction will put him over the edge. Should I go through with this disclosure? Children also go through difficult times in life. It's wise for parents to assess the proper timing of the disclosure whenever possible. At-risk children should be considered vulnerable. Your child may be considered at risk if he or she still struggles with any of the following: drug abuse and addiction, an eating disorder, major mental illness, thoughts of hurting themselves or others, running away, school truancy or other school difficulties, behavioural or conduct problems such as stealing or vandalism, problems with social or peer group functioning, although some of this is normal. If your child is experiencing any of these problems, you may want to delay or soften the disclosure process. Remember that many children already know about the acting out. Sometimes when children are struggling, they may be struggling with information about the sexual acting out, and their parents may be unaware that their children already have this information. If in these circumstances, discussion with a therapist to determine your course of action is warranted. My children are young adults. I don't think they would ever find out unless I told them. Should I bother sharing this information with them? While it may be a bit unsettling for adult children to learn their parent is a sex addict, typically the benefits far outweigh the consequences. Famous psychologist Carl Jung once said, "The most important gift a parent can give their child is to tell them about their dark side. Telling children about your struggles helps them developmentally to have a realistic picture of what it means to be human." When parents share their darkest struggles, sorrows, and pain with their children, it normalizes the children's darkness. The children realizes that they, too, will have dark times and that they can share with others and overcome them. It also deeply enriches the intimacy between parents and their children, and the children will be more likely to share their pain and struggles with their parents. Of course, when sharing the information with adult children, reassure them that you are working on your recovery, so the children don't worry about having to take care for the parent. For addicts in recovery, you want to avoid talking with their... many addicts in recovery want to avoid talking with their adult children due to their shame, but the exercise of disclosure can be shame reducing for the parent, and most adult children can handle the information and still demonstrate love for the addict. Can I share with my older child but not my younger sibling? It's important to be realistic that when siblings are close, they will share information with one another. Most siblings, especially those who are close in age, have a high degree of openness in sharing, especially when it comes to information about the parents. In these circumstances, it's important to use the age of your youngest child when considering disclosure, keeping in mind that your children will likely share the information. In the ideal situation, parents will determine what's appropriate to share and keep information consistent for all children. It can be distressing to children when they receive different information from different parents. For example, if an older child is closer to the addict and the younger one is closer to the spouse, and they are given different information, when the children talk, it will be confusing for them. They will be hurt that they weren't told everything, or be distrustful of some of the information. On the other hand, if there's a large age gap between your children, you might consider disclosing only to the older child. For example, if your older child is 16 and your younger one is 8, it's likely the 16-year-old is mature enough to not tell the younger sibling. However, keep in mind that even young children pick up on subtleties of communication and can be confused by non-verbal communication between older siblings and parents in a situation such as this. My partner and I have decided to share this information with the children. How should we do it? How can I make this process easier for them? Keep in mind that ultimately it's the addict's responsibility to disclose to the children. It's a key part of the addict's recovery to take responsibility for his or her behaviour and be accountable. This is the foundation of an addict's 12-step work. Family members also need to see the addict as remorseful and accountable. This can promote the necessary healing so the family can move past the shame and pain caused by the addiction. In an ideal world, the addict and partner will plan exactly what will be shared with the children. Corley and Snyder recommend the disclosure focus on the values that were violated and direct impact on the child. For example, I was dishonest, and as a result, Mummy was upset. Or I was unavailable because of my addiction, and as a result I was unable to attend your baseball games. It's often helpful to spend time and anticipate questions the children may have and how you respond. Below is a chart developed by Corley and Snyder that can assist you in anticipating questions that children might ask. What kids want to know by age. The following questions are what children might ask depending on their ages. Preschool, 3 to 5. They have often been witness to fighting and have heard that you're an addict and don't know what's happening. Are you going to leave me? Am I in trouble? Do you love me? Early elementary, 5 to 6. Is this my fault? Will something bad happen? Who are you now? Upper elementary, 9 to 13. Am I normal? Will I get this addiction because I have sexual feelings? Am I going to end up an addict because you are? What will happen to me if you get divorced? Teen and adult years. How could you do this to mum, to the family? How does this specifically relate to me? How could you ruin my life? You may also plan disclosure with a family therapist you trust. In this situation, the addict shares general information about his or her addiction and consequences. It's important not to share any detailed information about the sexual acting out with the children, if possible. Also, it's beneficial for the addict to share his or her current plan for recovery with the children for an age-appropriate basis. This will provide hope for the children and reduce their anxiety and fears. If possible, the partner should take a supportive role and be genuine in terms of his or her feelings. Children will pick up on it if the partner or the spouse is not genuine. If there are feelings of anger and sadness, the spouse can share with the kids that he or she is hurt, angry, or sad. However, it is important that the partner not take the victim role in front of the children. During the disclosure, it's crucial that the partner doesn't berate or shame the addict in front of the children, because they will have so many feelings of their own. This will be a difficult moment for children, whether they show it or not. You need to make their feelings and ability to process the information a top priority. Disclosure is a process, not a one-time event, and this applies even with children. Children may have additional questions over time, or as they mature, you may feel it's appropriate to share more information. Keep in mind that the strength of your relationship with your child will influence his or her ability to handle this information. Consequently, continue to do fun things together and keep working on the positive aspects of your relationship. My child is now upset. What can I do to help? There are times when upsetting information has to be shared with the child. A good example is the forced disclosure situation or circumstances when the child discovers the acting out behavior. The vast majority of children are going to react negatively to the disclosure experience. In the study by Black, Dillon and Carnes, 29 children were asked if they were glad they were told. Of these, 20 said yes. However, a majority of respondents didn't like the process of disclosure and didn't want the information to be true. Naturally, the more deviant the behavior, the more detailed the information shared. Let me say that again, guys. However, a majority of respondents didn't like the process and didn't like the information to be true. Naturally, the more deviant the behavior, the more detailed the information shared with the child. And the more public exposure in the incident, the more distressed the child will be. For example, if the father was the principal at a child's school and was caught with child pornography and it was in the media, this would be a complex and difficult situation for any child to handle. Sometimes it can be helpful for children to receive some education about sex addiction and assist them in normalizing the problem. Data demonstrates sexual addiction is a common problem that is typically not discussed in... That's our fire alarm, I think. So I'm going to pause recording for a second. Crisis averted. Dinner time in the family home. So back to this. Sometimes it can be helpful for children to receive some education about sex addiction and assist them in normalizing the problem. And data demonstrates sex addiction is a common problem that is typically not discussed, and education can be helpful in reducing shame. If the partner or spouse is involved in 12-step community, she or he may be aware of any events associated with 12-step fellowships, COSA or S&ON. The children may be able to attend. Attending a recovery-orientated lecture or meeting, or hearing someone share his or her, and I hope I can change this page. Story. Depending on the content of the lecture or meeting, may be beneficial for older children. You should also consider therapy for the child. Children do an amazing job at covering up their concerns and pain. If they have a good therapist whom they see as an ally and who can also do some occasional family work with the parents, it can facilitate healing. One of the most important things parents can do is maintain a sense of stability in the family. Having an addict move in and out of the home or having the child switch schools will only cause more pain and disruption for the child. Giving your daughter or son permission to still spend time with and love both parents is essential. Some of the most painful situations involve the addict moving out of the home and rarely spending time with the child. For example, if Ben learns his father is a sex addict and his father moves out of the house and his mother will not let Ben see Dad, this will only further alienate Ben from both parents. Ben will be hurt and confused by this type of behavior, of course. If the child is at risk for sexual abuse, that may be an exception. Giving the child reassurance and hope can make this distressing situation easier. If you feel able to genuinely and confidently reassure the child that nothing is going to change, doing so can be helpful. Sharing elements of recovery, such as special things that you and your partner have learned in the recovery process, may also reassure the child. Other positive steps may include introducing the child to safe, strong, recovering people. My child was exposed directly to my partner's acting out. What can I do to help her? I don't think I would ever become a sex addict had it not been for the discovery of my father's pornography stash when I was 8. I was so intrigued with what I saw. Whenever I was in pain, I would reach for the stash. This was the beginning of my addiction. Scott, 29, recovering addict. There are many ways that children can be exposed to the parent's sexual acting out behaviours. For example, they might accidentally discover a parent's pornography collection or find out about an affair. Keep in mind that children are absorbing information about sexuality at all times during their youth. They learn from their parents, other family members, friends, families, and even the media. When they see a parent's sexual acting out, it has the potential to influence the child's developing sexuality. For example, it's not uncommon for affairs to be a repeated pattern of behaviour from generation to generation. The child learns the affairs are acceptable in relationships after the behaviour was modelled for him or her. Similarly, pornography use can be passed down from generation to generation, and many pornography addicts report being exposed to it at a young age. If your child has been exposed to sexual acting out, some damage control is in order. It's best to keep from shaming the child or giving a negative or very strict moral messages. Rather, simply validate that it's normal to be sexually curious at their age and that their sexuality is a healthy part of life. An open discussion about intimacy and healthy sexuality is helpful in these circumstances. If the sexual acting out had overtones of objectifying or degrading one's partner, then a discussion on healthy sexuality as mutual and respectful should take place. Occasionally, children will worry that they too are going to become a sex addict. This is especially true for teenage boys who are experiencing a normal increase in hormones. An open dialogue normalizing these feelings can reduce anxiety. In the worst situations, a child may have been molested or experienced incest as part of the sexual acting out. Clearly, treatment would be critical for these children. Keep in mind that some children who have been sexually abused do not develop long-term problems, so it's important not to pathologize the child under these circumstances while still trying to listen, validate, and understand the child's experience. My partner and I cannot agree on whether to disclose. What should I do? Consider the case of Mary and Roger. Nothing could describe the pain Mary experienced when they discovered Roger's sexual addiction. Not only had he been involved with prostitutes, but he had engaged in several affairs. The last one was with Mary's closest friends. She was devastated. She could not bear to talk with him, sit across the table from him, or even look at him. Plus, they had 2 children together, Jonathan, 9, and Rebecca, 11. Mary believed the kids needed to know the truth about their father's sexual acting out. Roger, on the other hand, thought it was none of their business. Jonathan and Rebecca had always been close to their dad, so when Mary shared everything with them about Roger's sexual acting out, it was quite a shock. When Roger denied Mary's accusations, Jonathan and Rebecca were hurt and confused. They felt sorry for their mum. They felt like they had to choose sides. Extended family was also dragged into the conflict. Everyone in the family suffered, especially Jonathan and Rebecca. As seen in this case example, when parents can't agree on the course of action, it's usually the children who suffer the most. Unfortunately, couples struggling with sex addiction are often in such intense pain it's hard for the needs of the children to be placed above the parents' needs. If the couple is heading for a divorce, sometimes separation counselling can be helpful. This type of therapy is not geared towards reconciliation or emotional processing of feelings. Rather, it focuses on issues relating to ongoing contact, such as negotiating co-parenting issues and boundaries. This may be a helpful venue for discussing how to share information with the children. Again, remember that the child's needs supersede your needs in these situations, and it's usually in the child's best interest to work towards an agreement on the issue. In summary, There are many factors to consider that can make this an easier process for your children. The list below highlights some of the key characteristics of a healthy disclosure that can make the process healthier. Disclosure is facilitated by a therapist and is not a one-time process. Both parents are present and participate. Both parents are in agreement to disclose to the children. Both parents articulate why this is important and of value to the child. Both parents have strategized and agree upon what is and is not to be disclosed. Parents speak for themselves. The addict and the partner each speak about their own behaviour. The addict speaks in generalities about addictive behaviour, not specific details. Parents display signs of recovery. Neither parent takes the role of victim. The child is not used as a confidant. Parents are clear that it is not the child's responsibility to fix or take care of them. It's easy for the child to become caught in a triangle, choosing sides, then reacting on behalf of the person who is perceived to be the victim parent. Open dialogue and discussion with the therapist is shown. Set the tone for the children to know that they can discuss it with you as they need to or as you believe it is appropriate. To say or imply, we'll talk about this today and never again, reinforces the shame of disclosure and the behaviour. Educating your children about sex addiction can be one of the most important lessons you can teach. Empowering them with information so they don't repeat the mistakes you've made can save them a lot of pain. Conversely, if they wander down the same path in the future, your recovery can serve as a source of hope for them and give them the power to stop the cycle of sex addiction in their family. So guys, that was a long one, I know, today, half an hour, but I think it's such an important issue, and I hope that this is going to steer towards that book. The book, again, maybe I can go backwards here and show you that book one more time, but the book is Mending a Shattered Heart, edited by Stefanie Carnes. A lot of contributors to that book and that are the head of their fields in this area. So please have a look at that. This is the Movember code to scan. Thank you guys that are donating out there. That's awesome. And donate to someone that you know. If not me, if you're seeing someone, their mustaches should be looking pretty good 2 weeks in. I didn't have the heart to save this one off. I might shave it off at the end of Movember. And so, guys, there'll be more coming up this weekend, a talk by Robert Weiss. So if you are in a coupleship and you're hearing this, please contact us through the website and join the incredible talk Robert Weiss is going to offer us on sex addiction, betrayal, trauma, and recovery. With that, I will say good night.